Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well and had a lovely day from wherever you are joining us at the moment. For those I do not know, my name is Ella and I look after the Tourism Awards programs for TIC SA, and that includes our new South Australian Top Tour Guide Award, new in 2026, which I'm very excited to introduce to South Australia. For those who are joining us live, just keep yourself on mute and we'll have some question time at the end. And for a number of people who are joining us online in a recording later on, as you're all very busy being guides, if you can just view this on YouTube, and it's an ongoing resource for you to use as you complete your written submission if you choose to nominate for this award. So before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from Ghana country. I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge the traditional custodians of various lands where you all join me from today. At TICSA, we recognise the diversity of First Nations peoples and acknowledge their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of South Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that we aim to make this space an inclusive environment, and we'd like to acknowledge the people in our community who have advocated for everyone's right to belong and bring attention to the ways we can do this. Accessibility and inclusion are very important. So, Top Tour Guide. Very excited to launch this in South Australia. This program is a national program that's been running for a few years now, but it's the first time we'll be running it in South Australia, which is really exciting. This program is all about recognising the significant contribution that tour guides make to tourism every day as individuals, as groups, as operators. You provide such memorable experiences to visitors from intrastate, interstate, and from all over the world. And it's high time that you're recognized for those individual qualities that make our tour guides so unique and special. So this program is all about acknowledging those people who go above and beyond to develop those incredible visitor experiences on the ground every single day. So it's about the individual guide, less so the business, although the business does reap the benefits from entering this award from a development standpoint and then also from a promotional standpoint as well. So why enter this awards program? So, like I said, it's all about acknowledging guiding excellence. It's a individual excellence program. And it's all about acknowledging what those guides do every day in the South Australian tourism industry. So a number of the questions will, in the written submission and the questions in the interview component, which I'll get to a little bit later, they're all about deciphering how you go above and beyond for the visitor, what your touring knowledge is like and skills are like. It's a great opportunity to develop areas for professional development and growth as an individual, and also for the operator if an operator nominates the individual guide. And it's also great to get some acknowledgement from external sources. The judges are made up from external to TICSA, and it's great to be able to get feedback from outside of your business and outside of your everyday to help you continue to grow as a tour guide. And it's also a great opportunity for the guides and also the businesses or the nominators nominating them to showcase your commitment to quality tourism experiences. I think winning or even becoming a finalist for a awards program like Top Tour Guide is a great opportunity to showcase to your consumers and your everyday visitors that you're dedicated to providing the best experience possible every single day. And these awards are a great way to demonstrate that. And of course, if you do choose to enter, the benefit here is bragging rights. If you do win Top Tour Guide, that's an incredible accolade to put onto your resume, and you will get to go on to the national Top Tourism Town Awards and Top Tour Guide Awards, which are held in Canberra in September every year. So you'll get a chance to go on and compete against other top tour guides from around the nation, which is pretty cool. But that being said, even if you nominate and you're a finalist for this program, I think that's a brilliant accolade in itself, and it's an opportunity to showcase the guide against multiple other guides from around the state, and it's a great community growth thing. So to kickstart, I just want to talk about some quick key dates. As it's a new program, something to keep in mind are the dates that you'll have to nominate and the dates that you'll have to complete your submission, and then also what that interview process looks like. So nominations have already opened. They opened on the 2nd of February, which was about 2.5 weeks ago now. And nominations will close on the 2nd of March, so which is about a week and a half away. Can't believe it's already March, but yes, it's getting close. So if you haven't nominated yet, highly encourage you to put your nomination in by the 2nd of March. If you have any questions about nominating, please just reach out if you're concerned or need any support, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Submissions, so the written submission component of this program is due on the 28th of April. I believe that's a Tuesday, if you're thinking about the weekdays. So this is for your written submission component. And then following that, the tour guide interviews, which is another component of your entry, will be conducted in late May. Once you've submitted your written submission, that's when we'll actually be in touch with the guide to arrange either an in-person or online interview with our judges. And I'll provide more detail about that in a moment. And then once that's all been done and dusted and the judges have done their final judging, the winner will be announced in mid-June at our South Australian Tourism Conference. That will be held on the 16th to 17th of June if you want to lock it in your calendar. But that will be announced at our welcome function along with the top Tourism Town Award winners. So it's a great opportunity to network with industry and showcase yourself as a finalist and showcase the guide that's been made it through to finalists and hear the winner be announced. So eligibility requirements. So this is the main thing that probably everyone needs to pay attention to. So with eligibility requirements, so eligibility includes tour guides and coach captains working in either a natural, cultural, and or heritage environment in either a paid or a volunteer capacity. So in terms of tour guides, what we're looking for is, do they work in nature or a cultural landscape, or do they work in a heritage landscape? So ideally, they fall into one or more of those categories. And then they can be either a paid or volunteer capacity. So if you are an operator and you have a mix of paid and volunteer tour guides, you are welcome to nominate from either. We recognize that paid tour guides do a lot of work dedicating themselves every day as part of their employment to guiding. But we also recognize that there are a number of organizations that have volunteer tour guides who dedicate a lot of time to this as well. So highly encourage you to think about if you have got volunteer tour guides, you can nominate them for this program. It's a great opportunity too. So entries are open to guides employed by or contracted to a tourism business. So this can be a private or a public entity. They just have to be employed or contracted to you. If you're a sole trader, which is the case for a number of tour operators around South Australia and around the country as well, you just have to be a sole trader operating under your own business name. You can then nominate yourself as a tour guide or nominate any tour guides that you might employ casually for this program. So certainly not off limits to sole traders. You can nominate yourselves. If you're not a sole trader and you are a tourism operator, you might be a partnership or a slightly different business structure. Generally, you can get a colleague to nominate you if you're looking to nominate yourself, or you just nominate one of your guides. But if you're a sole trader, understanding that that is one person operating that business. So if you do look to nominate a guide and that guide is yourself, you can do that. Nominations must be made by businesses who hold current quality and sustainable tourism accreditation. So all businesses who make the nomination have to be quality and sustainable tourism accredited. So if you're not accredited, you can achieve quality and sustainable tourism accreditation prior to submitting your top tour guide submission. That is completely possible. It's not due until the 28th of April. All that's involved to become accredited is an online application to demonstrate that your business meets a specific quality assurance criteria. and is committed to best practice. This application won't take too long if you've got everything in place. But that being said, we are here to help you go through that accreditation process, and we have had businesses achieve it in probably a few week period, so about a 2 week period, but it can be longer. So if you're not accredited, I highly encourage you to reach out to me for further information and support as to how you can become accredited and whether or not you can achieve that on top of your written submission before the submission deadline. It's certainly possible. You just have to make sure that you use the time that you have now to get it done. So highly encourage, if you're in that situation and you want to nominate but you're not accredited, just have a chat to me and happy to talk through your specific situation. Completing the nomination. So all nominations are completed via the QTF portal. If you're accredited, you probably will know what I'm talking about. If you're not accredited, basically this is a portal where your accreditation is managed, but also where awards nominations are managed. So to nominate, you just have to go to a link which I'll share with you after this session, and you may have to register if you're not already a user. But then there'll be an option to nominate a tour guide there for the South Australian Top Tour Guide Awards. When you go to nominate a guide, the things you'll need to have handy is obviously who you are nominating, so the name of the nominated individual. An introduction of the individual, so it's about 100 words, and usually those 100 words are kind of set around a bit about what the tour guide does and why they are deserving of a nomination and submission for this Top Tour Guide Award. So you can just type that into the portal, or you can have that ready to go when you go to nominate. And then also the other thing to be mindful of is once you have nominated, you will be required to just provide some professional images of the guide in action. These are for promotional purposes only, for TIC-SA to use when spruiking finalists and the winner of Top Tour Guide. So please keep that in mind when you are making the nomination and you go to start completing your submission. There will be a request to provide some professional images. So call on the guide or call on your photo library and see what you have available to share there. All right, entry criteria. So the nitty-gritty of this awards program. So the Top Tour Guide Award will be scored a total score out of 100. This is made up of two components. So 50% of the score will be determined by a panel of industry judges assessing a written submission. The written submission is formed in a series of questions, much similar to if you've ever participated in the South Australian Tourism Awards. It's somewhat similar, not as many words and not as many questions, but somewhat similar. And then the other 50% is determined again by a panel of industry judges who are conducting an interview of the tour guide. So very much that interview, think of it like any kind of job interview, but it will be centered around the guide's experience and different scenarios that they've experienced as a guide. But I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Yeah, so like I said, the entry components, there'll be a written submission against a set criteria. So those are a series of questions that you'll be required to answer. And between 2,000 and 5,000 words is the written submission. So you can write 2,000 words or you can write 5,000 words. It's completely up to you, but you have a max of 5,000. And there's a set word count in the guidelines and criteria, which I'll share with you after this, that tells you how many words are expected for each question, roughly, in terms of max word count you can use. That provided as a guidance. And then also a 30-minute interview with the judging panel. And this can be in person or online, depending on where you are located in South Australia, understanding that, you know, for our further away regions, it's difficult for an in-person interview to take place logistically, particularly if you are in a busy season for your guiding. So keep in mind that we will offer both options, in person or online, and we will let you know what that looks like closer to the date. The other component to your submission is a reference letter. So this reference letter is provided for each guide, for each entry. And generally, that reference letter must be provided from the person nominating the guide. So often that's the business owner or a business colleague, but it must be provided by whoever's nominating the guide, the nominator. If you're operating as a sole trader and you're nominating yourself, that is fine too. The reference letter should be ideally written by a third party, and that could be a former employer, a colleague. So, if you have, employees in your business, or a tour guest, or even perhaps someone who works with you on your tours as well. If you work with other businesses, that's potentially an option as well, but it should be written by a third party. This letter needs to include what the relationship is to the nominator guide. So, the nominator or the person you're getting to write, if you're a sole trader, what the relationship is between the two of you. The summary of the guide's role and tour and company, so what it is they do. An endorsement of the guide's strengths and skills. So this is an opportunity to spruik what kind of strengths and skills you want the judges to be able to see in this letter, what you want to highlight and emphasize about the guide. Um, 1 to 2 specific examples. So, particularly if you are endorsing specific strengths and skills, have a think about examples that you can use that demonstrate those strengths and skills in action. Obviously, keeping them relatively short examples just because it is a reference letter. But have a think about what some of those examples could be. And then a reason for nominating them. So it all comes down to, why are you nominating this guy for this award? Why do you think they're deserving of the, Hello SA Top Tour Guide for 2026? So with this letter, you don't have to provide it until your final written submission is due. So that's the 28th of April. So that will go along with your written submission in the QTF portal. So if you do choose to nominate a guide, or if you're a sole trader nominating yourself, just have a think about putting that letter together with enough time ahead of that due date of the 28th of April. But if you have any questions about the reference letter and just making sure that it's being written by the right person, please feel free just to get in touch with that one. Written submission. So, like I said, the written submission is that's a typo, it should be between 2,000 and 5,000 words. This written submission should focus on activities which took place in the 2025 calendar year. So, very similar to if anyone listening or here has participated in the South Australian Tourism Awards, much like we have a qualifying period, which we like you to detail activities that have taken place during that. For this submission, we like you to focus on activities that took place last calendar year, being 2025. That being said, with the submission, you can use examples from other years, but ideally, the majority of the written submission should focus on activities in the 2025 calendar year. That's what should be the key focus for this submission. The written submission can be written by the guide nominated or by the nominator. So basically the guide can't nominate themselves unless they're a sole trader. It needs to be the business owner or colleague nominating them. But when it comes to the written submission, the guide can write that themselves. It's more than welcome. That being said, the nominator can also write it. What I would encourage here is, no matter what you choose, if the guide chooses to write the nomination or it's written by the nominator, it's good to get both eyes to go across it, just so that you can see, so that the nominator can ensure that it's highlighting all the key aspects of the guide that the guide may not necessarily talk about, and also so that if the nominator is writing it, the guide can have a look at it to make sure that they're not missing anything either. So it can be written by either party, but it's also worth both parties actually looking over the final submission so that they know what has been written and can amend and adjust as necessary. So tour guides who work on multiple tours, for the purpose of this written submission, you should preferably focus on one tour. So for example, if you have multiple tour products that you offer or work on as part of your guiding experience, ideally pick one and focus on the activities within that tour. However, you can provide examples from other tours in addressing the submission criteria, and I'll show you some of that criteria in a moment. And yes, like I said, word count between 2,000 and 5,000 words. That excludes the overview of the tour guide, which is almost that introductory statement that is not counted to the word count, which I'll show you momentarily. So, your written submission will include 5 different components. The first component being the overview of the nominee. So this is not worth any marks and it's not counted to your overall word count. You do have a max of 500 words to play with, so you will have to keep this overview short and succinct. But it's not included to your total word count, so you don't need to worry about it in that aspect. So this is your chance to make a first impression with the judges about the nominated guide. So think about it almost similar to what you do if you were overviewing your business. You're providing an overview of the tour guide and their history and guiding the history with the business if you're nominating them as a business owner, or history as a sole trader. And bits and pieces like that. In terms of the specific questions within that, I'll provide that afterwards in the submission guidelines and rules, which are clearly outlined there. The tour plan of the nominee. So this is where you're required to go into a specific tour. That's why we ask you to focus on one tour and talk about what the delivery, what the plan for that tour looked like. So how it was put together, who it's targeting, what it looks like. And then the next section goes into the delivery of that tour. So again, that's why we ask you to focus on one tour. If you're trying to focus on multiple tours, it's not going to work with the questions that we have in this awards program. So please keep that in mind. Before you start your submission, start thinking about which tour you're going to pick. Have a look at the questions and see which tour perhaps you feel most will give you the most to work with in terms of the questions. But the questions mainly focus around the planning of the tour and the delivery of the tour. Both these sections are worth 15 marks, and you have a max of 1,500 words for each of those. Then we have evaluation and customer service. So this focuses more around how do you get customer feedback? How do you evaluate the success of the tour? And also looking at customer service as well. So this is where you'll still aim to focus on the one tour that you've been talking about, but you should be thinking if there are any other examples that you can pull on from other tours, this is where you could include them. And so the questions here will predominantly focus around how you continuously improve on your touring product using customer feedback, and how you make sure that your customer service is top notch on your tour. But this is probably the best place where you can introduce some other examples beyond the one tour that you'll be focusing on. And that's worth 15 marks and a max of 1,500 words. And then the last section is improving skills, which is worth 5 marks and a max of 500 words. So this is more about what kind of opportunities and what kind of methods or pathways is the tour guide taking to consistently improve. So that may look like, for example, taking different courses in different elements of customer service or visitor experience. It could simply look like shadowing other tour guides and learning. It could be taking the time to develop a new tour product. Basically, this question that's asked in this section is aimed to highlight how the guide is aiming to continuously improve in terms of their professional development as a guide. So it will ask you to provide details around if you're attending any workshops. TSA workshops are great ones to put in there. Any workshops, any courses, or you're taking the opportunity to learn from others or do any internal training to continuously improve those skills. So that is what forms the written submission. So in terms of the questions within that, like I said, make sure that you have a look at the guidelines and rules that I'll circulate afterwards, where you can see the specific questions that are asked within the written submission. I won't go into detail for them here. But if you do have a read through the questions and you have any questions for me about the questions, please feel free to reach out. But like I said, the key with the written submission is focusing on one tour and threading examples from other tours where they are relevant. Right, the interview. So once you've gotten the written submission done and out the way, and once your guide has submitted their written submission, Each guide is required to participate in a 30-minute interview with our panel of judges. So what we will do, like I said before, is once your written submission has been submitted, we'll be in contact directly with the guide or the nominator, probably both, and we will schedule a time for your interview to take place in late May in accordance with the judge's availability and the guide's availability. This interview may take place in person or online. Again, like I said, depending on where the guide is located, we can offer both options, but there is no pressure for anyone who is a long way out of Adelaide, because our judges will likely be based more in Adelaide, and some of them might be remote as well. So if the judges are remote, we may have to do an online, even if you're based in Adelaide. So we do have the option to do both, but when we get in touch to schedule, we'll determine what the best option is, whether be it in person or online. The interview questions for this interview will be shared ahead of time. In fact, they're already available, and I will circulate them after this call. These will be shared ahead of time to allow the guide time to prep. Almost thinking of it as any kind of job interview. It's just the interview will focus more on the guide's experience, and the questions particularly are tailored to talking about different scenarios that the guides may have experienced, be that in customer service, be that in delivery of the tour guide, be that in customer feedback. The judges will go through some different scenarios, and the guide will need to answer those questions and deliver to those scenarios. But the questions will be shared ahead of time so that the guide has time to prepare in advance. Great. So entrance support in terms of what's available. As I said, this is the first year we're running this. So if you do choose to participate in this program and you have any feedback to share at the conclusion, please do. We want this to be an excellent opportunity for guides to engage with professional development and growth, and use this program not only to go for gold in terms of going for top tour guide, but also to ensure that it actually brings benefit back to the guide and the business from a skills and improvement perspective. That being said, the support available to you, I particularly encourage you to read through the guidelines and rules for 2026. As it's a new program, this is a great opportunity to get yourself accustomed. The guidelines and rules have all the written submission questions and also all the interview questions as well. So highly encourage you to take the time to read through that in detail so that you know what to expect. And then the next lot of entrance support, I really encourage you to engage with me. Have a chat about what you're thinking about for which guide you're thinking about nominating, what you're thinking about including in your written submission. I'm a great bounce board. I can't read your submissions in full, but I'm always happy to answer questions and provide thoughts where I can. So please don't hesitate to engage with me wherever possible. So before you go away and nominate, and before you think about getting started, there's just a few things I want you to keep in mind. And some of them I've already talked about, but some of them I'm looking to talk about again. Some new things I will talk about. And if you've entered the South Australian Tourism Awards, you've probably heard some of these before. So again, like I said before when we were talking about the written submission, make sure the nominated guide and the nominator both review the written submission. It's really important, even just to get a second perspective. In fact, I'd probably get a third person who's external to them to look at it, because it's always good to get an extra set of eyes. But whoever chooses to write it, the guide or the nominator, it's really important that they both read it, I think, to make sure that nothing is missed, to make sure that the submission is a great representation of the guide, but then also a good representation of the business that has nominated them. So whichever you choose, and there's no right or wrong, either one can write it. Just make sure that both parties look at it. Storytelling. It's an important aspect of guiding, as you do every day. You all tell brilliant stories. So with this submission, don't be afraid to tell a story. Be creative with your language. Bring the judge bring the tour to life. Bring the judge in and grab them with a hook. Think about different ways that you can sell your tour to them by telling that story. In the interview component, there'll be a great opportunity for the guide to show their personality and show, their storytelling strengths. But it's always good to try and make that impression on paper as well. So as you're writing the submission and you're looking to answer the questions, have a think about if this is ticking the box from a storytelling perspective. And if you were reading that submission, would that persuade you to then go ahead and take that tour guide's tour? So storytelling is great. And if you've entered the South Australian Tourism Awards before, storytelling is probably something that you've done in submissions before. So very similar here. Any data or evidence is advantageous. So particularly for when you're talking about the delivery of the tour in your written submission, and when you're also talking about the customer service and evaluation portion of the written submission as well. Any anecdotes, guest testimonials, or sentiment data, feedback from surveys, anything that your business would collect or that you as an individual guide would collect from your visitors after the tour or during the tour. Any of this will be really compelling to include in the submission. Whilst it is about the individual, particularly when you're trying to demonstrate how you're continuously improving in those customer service and feedback elements and how you're looking to improve the delivery of the tour, data like this can be really, really helpful. So please have a think about when you are answering those portions of the written submission. Is there anywhere I can pop in an anecdote or a guest testimonial? Is there anywhere where I can include some sentiment data about how people feel about my tour? If the tour had taken place during the 2025 calendar year, and perhaps you don't have a full suite of data, just include whatever data you can, even if that's just initial data if you only ran the tour second half of the year. Just think about any ways that you can incorporate that data in there, be it short-term data or slightly longer-term data if it took place at the start of 2025, or if it's a tour that you've been running for years. And like I said, the really key thing is focus on one tour. That will be the thing that sets you up for success. From advice from other states, the thing that unravels written submissions for the top tour guide program is when they try to focus on too many tours and they try to provide too many different examples from too many tours. It makes it difficult for the judge to follow. So I highly recommend that you take the opportunity to focus on one tour for the majority of the submission. And if relevant and you perhaps don't have an example from the one tour you've selected, you can choose examples from other tours, particularly for that customer service and evaluation section, or from the planning aspect, if there's something that you've learned from other tours that you've introduced from a planning perspective into this tour. So make sure you have a think about that early before you start writing. And otherwise you might get stuck with a tour that doesn't quite have the content that you need to complete the written submission. So those are probably the 4 big things to keep in mind with this written submission. Great. So that's the Top Tour Guide Awards process, program, and submission in a nutshell. As I said, this is the first year we're running it. So if you are choosing to nominate, we highly welcome feedback. But this is a great opportunity to acknowledge guides in a different way. Separate from the South Australian Tourism Awards, it's a great opportunity to acknowledge that individual guiding excellence and the many, many guides that operate in South Australia. Many of you are so excellent, and we would love to acknowledge you in this way and put a spotlight on how important guiding is, not only to the state but also to the nation as well. So with that, obviously a number are watching the recording at a later date, but for those who are here live, do you have any questions that you would like to raise now? You're welcome to come off mute if you do, or type it in the chat as well.
Hello, Ella. I'm so
Kelly,
sorry I was a little bit late and I
you're
possibly
fine.
may have missed this.
You're all good.
But is the awards presentation part of the top tourism towns or the state tourism award?
the top tourism towns. So,
Okay.
for this first year, as we're introducing it, it will be with the top tourism towns on the 16th of June at the South
The
Australian Tourism
conference.
Conference as part of the welcome event. So, which is
Amazing.
great, which is great for guides. Anyone who's listening who has a business with multiple guides, it's a great opportunity to nominate them and get them to attend the tourism conference at the same time. So, yes, so you can pop that one in your diary if you do end up nominating, and I'm sure you'll be there anyway, Kelly.
Yes, I love that conference. Thank you.
No worries.
Ella, just here from me with the obviously I'm a sole trader,
Hmm.
and just with the reference, you said ex-employer, so that can be one from a couple of years ago, obviously before you became a sole trader. So
Yeah,
someone that you
yeah.
guided for.
Yeah, and I think in the case of a sole trader, obviously if it's an ex-employer, preferably someone who knows you from a guiding perspective,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you've been a tour guide employed elsewhere. But yes, absolutely, an ex-employer is a good option to go with, as long as it's a third party who can demonstrate a relationship to your guiding, that will be acceptable in this regard.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that should be all fine then. Just thought I'd
Cool.
double check on that one.
No worries. Easy done. Perfect. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap this one up here. Like I said, I really, really highly encourage you if you have any questions or concerns, or you need a board to bounce off of, I am available via email or phone and happy to take any questions or to have a chat about what a nomination or a submission looks like for one of your guides. So please make sure you use me as a resource and I'm happy to help. Um, Nominations will close on the 2nd of March. So if you haven't already nominated, please make sure you nominate in the QTF portal by that day. I'll circulate the link and also the guidelines and criteria after this as well, and also circulate this recording so that you can use it as an ongoing resource to refer to whilst you are writing your written submission. But in the meantime, wishing you all the best of luck if you choose to nominate for the Top Tour Guide Award. Like I said, we're really thrilled to have this introduced into South Australia for the first time this year. And I'm really looking forward to being able to acknowledge our tour guides in a different way and in their own spotlight. So thank you very much. Hope you have a lovely evening, and I hope to be in touch with you soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Ella.
you.
Cheers for that. See
No
ya.
worries. Thank you.